In our last problems, we were looking at finding the sum of signed numbers, just working by hand and using what we know about the rules for signed numbers. But if you remember, part of the directions were to use our calculator to check our work. And so we want to get comfortable with that idea of using our calculator to double check the work that we're doing by hand. Now be careful that we're not always going to have a calculator handy or get to use a calculator on an exam or on an assignment. And so we want to be sure that while we can do these things by hand, when we have the calculator to use as a tool to help us, we can double check our work. The problems we did here are certainly nothing that we would want to take all the trouble to find our calculator for, but if we've got it handy, we can double check our work with it. So using the calculator, the main thing to remember when we've got signed numbers is the difference between the subtraction sign and the negative sign. And so if we take a look at our calculator again here, this button here is the minus sign. That's the operation to do subtraction. Down at the bottom where we have the negative in little parentheses, that's the button that we're going to use to tell the calculator we want it to work with a negative number. So we have to be very careful not to use subtract when we mean negative. So for the first problem, we have 3 plus negative 7. So on our calculator, we're going to say 3 plus, and then we're going to do a negative 7. Now notice over in our problem, the negative 7 was in parentheses. So even though our calculator doesn't get too worried about it, I'm going to go ahead and use our parentheses just so we can get used to doing that. So 3 plus negative 7, and then because we opened the parentheses, we want to close the parentheses, and then press enter, and yep, we can see that that confirms our answer of negative 4. Our next example doesn't have any parentheses around it, so we don't need to worry about that. Negative 4 plus 8, so we're going to go plus 8 equals, and there's the positive 4 that we came up with when we did it by hand. Now our last problem, we had lots of negatives running around, so we want to be sure that we're using our negative button down here. Negative 2 plus negative 5. And notice in this case I didn't use my parentheses. Let's see what happens in that case. Well, my calculator still knows that I've got the negative 7. If I were to do the problem again using the parentheses, negative 2 plus negative 5, and then opening and closing the parentheses around the negative 5, notice that we come up with the same answer. So it would work either way. It's a good idea, though, to get comfortable using those parentheses in our calculator, because there are times when those parentheses are going to make all the difference between telling our calculator the right thing and telling it the wrong thing.